Thanks for being with us this afternoon. First up, most private sector players are expected to delay their investment plans beyond 2023, which will affect the country's economic growth in the near term. According to Face Solutions, this is due to the expected reduction in loans and advancements by banks. The debt exchange program has had a toll on banks' balance sheets, thus reducing their incomes. Here's Mike Kuniga, senior country analyst for Sub-Saharan Africa, saying significant borrowing constraints would weaken investment plans for both banks and businesses.
So, believe that significant borrowing constraints for businesses and the government alike will weaken investment plans. Domestic banks will face significant pressure on their balance sheets in light of Ghana's domestic debt restructuring program, weakening their ability to issue loans to corporates and authorities. We therefore expect that many institutions will delay their investment plans beyond 2023, which obviously isn't great for the short-term growth outlook.
Well, welcome back to the marketplace. We want to get back to that story to do with imported inflation. As we have been reporting for the month of April, it declined to 43.1% from 51.6% in March, according to data from the Ghana Statistical Service. There are some analysts who believe this could be as a result of the cedi's stability. But I want you to take a listen to the government statistician, Professor Samuel Kwabnenim. When that question was posed to him, he was not quick to jump to that conclusion.
Thank you very much. So again, let's keep in mind that all three variables that we've talked about do not have a direct input in the computation of consumer price index and rate of inflation. Taxes, monetary policy rate, and what is going to happen on the foreign exchange market only influence our consumer price index and rate of inflation indirectly. And it's one of the reasons why we thought today's presentation should highlight the inter- and intra-regional variations that we are seeing. We feel that there is a lot that we have to do at the real sector perspective to complement whatever the central bank is doing to ensure that we bring down inflation. So it's our expectation that conversations would ensue around why consistently in the last 3 months we are seeing the Western North region recording the highest food inflation, why we're going to ask questions that in the last 7 months the Volta region has recorded the least food inflation. This is the conversation that should happen in order to help us better predict the indirect effect that we are only hypothesizing that it would affect inflation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you all for coming.
Well, joining us, banking and finance lecturer, Dr. Jabil Mohammed, with some analysis on this, plus the other news we're covering about the delays in loan advancement. I want to start with the thoughts of the government statistician, as we just heard, on imported inflation, the decline. We asked him, does it have anything to do with the cedi's stability? He says, well, it's too quick to jump to that conclusion. What do you think is accounting for this decline we are seeing in imported inflation?
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to your viewers. Inflation is basically about the general price level, the increase in the general price level of goods and services. Imported inflation maybe is as a result of, let's say, an increase in generally the exchange rate will have a serious impact on inflationary tendencies. But that notwithstanding, we have seen a consistent stability in terms of the cedi in recent times. And when the cedi is stable, then we are able to import at the lower cost, and that will have a general impact on price levels that you import into the country. But that notwithstanding, you cannot conclusively say that without actually gathering the goods that we have imported and seeing the differentials in terms of the price levels on which we imported previously and the current one, then you can compute the differences to be able to see that that stability is there. If you look at the food inflation that trended downward, it's about 7.5% reduction in terms of food inflation, imported food inflation, which is a bit highly significant. You may attribute that to the price. You may attribute that to that price differentials in terms of the inflation that is being imported, and that is what and that of what is currently existing in the country. So you can juxtapose that with that foreign inflation and the existing inflation. But I will conclude that it's too close time to predict that. What is accounting for that is what is accounting for that is the exchange rate. So let's wait and see in the next coming months whether inflation is likely to drop again. So let's say by 35% or something like that. Then we can say that the exchange rate stability is contributing to that. But right now, we cannot conclude that in terms of the stability of the exchange rate is what is contributing to the general decrease in the price level of imported inflation.
The stability of local currency is important in sustaining this decline in imported food inflation.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say, that the stability of the local currency can contribute significantly to that. But the time is within just 1 month, we cannot conclude that. So let's wait and see in the next coming month whether we will have another downward trend in terms of inflation and whether the currency can still be stable as we are seeing it today.
Okay. And in terms of the currency in itself, what do we need to do to keep it where it is or even better in terms of performance to the dollar and other major trading currencies?
Well, I think it should come from productivity point of view. If we are able to increase productivity and reduce the level of import, then we will be in a better position to keep the cedi stable. But as it stands right now, if you consistently increase your import, then you are going to have challenges with your local currency. Are we able to produce enough to feed our local economy? Are we so much dependent on foreign goods and services? If we are able to do much on the real sector of the economy, then we can have a point to argue that it's going to help to keep inflation downward, or it's going to help to keep the currency stable. But for now, if we are not able to do much on the real sector by producing more goods and services, then it's going to be extremely difficult for us to have a stable currency.
All right. I want us to switch topics and talk about our first story this afternoon to do with a reduction in the advancement of loans and the fear that is going to affect the plans of private sector businesses, their investment plans going forward beyond 2023. We've had businesses over the years complain about how difficult it is for them to access loans from banks. But this time, the banks are in a difficult position as a result of the losses they incurred from the debt exchange program and genuinely may not be able to advance much loans, can they?
Well, the debt exchange program has had a significant impact on the banking sector, largely because most of the banks have recorded significant losses. Both foreign banks and local banks have all recorded significant losses in terms of the first quarter of the year. And even last year, between last year and 2021, there has been significant losses from the banking point of view. You bear with me that most of the banks keep most of their excess funds in government treasury bills. Some of them keep close to about 50 to 60% of their loanable funds in government security. So obviously, if the government is not paying them on time, or if the government is going to defer their payment, is directly going to impact on their performance. And to the private sector, if the banks are denied of funds and they don't have enough money in their buffers, they may not be able to lend to the private sector. And to the extent that the Bank of Ghana is asking the banks to reduce their interest rate because inflation is trending downward and that treasury bills are trending downward, but monetary policy rate is being increased because the central bank is a lender of last resort. So if you increase monetary policy rate, you are constraining funds to the private sector because you are going to compete with the private sector to even borrow from the banks. So how are the banks going to get enough funds to give to the private sector? And in addition to that, the treasury bills and monetary policy rate and the interbank rate affects the lending rate of banks because it enters into the Ghana referencing rate. Because monetary policy rate takes 40%, inflation takes 40%, interbank takes 20%. So if that base rate is high, obviously it's going to impact on banks, because banks will add their premium to it and lend at a higher cost to banks.
Right.
But if that is trending downward, then they can enforce it to the extent that the banks can reduce by that margin.
And it's interesting, yesterday when we had the central bank appeal to banks to cut down on lending rates due to the consistent drop in inflation rate, it makes you wonder how that is possible when the central bank itself increased the policy rate in the last few months to tame inflation.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So how can you increase policy rate to tame down inflation? Then you are asking banks to reduce their lending rate. Obviously, when policy rate increases, it's going to affect the Ghana reference rate, as I said earlier on. So I'm just urging the central bank maybe to also reduce the monetary policy rate. If you want to help banks to reduce their interest rate, then you should also reduce the monetary policy rate. You cannot be mopping up the so-called excess liquidity when at the same time you are asking banks to reduce their lending rate. It does not match. Economically, it does not match.
Well, they're meeting next week. Let's see what comes out of that. But finally, I want us to talk about the implications if businesses delay their investment plans, because the private sector is very important in our economic recovery process, and we need to strike the right balance, right?
Yes. So banks are the lifeblood of the economy, and the private sector is the engine of growth. So the private sector needs that kind of funding to be able to improve on their real sector. If you lend at a lower cost to private sector, they are going to improve on their productivity. And that means that it's going to increase GDP, and eventually government will generate more revenue and jobs will be created. So if you stifle the private sector from generating the needed resources or the needed revenue, the needed funding to be able to inject into the real sector of the economy and develop, then obviously your GDP is not going to grow. So at the end of the day, the GDP is going to be affected, government revenue will be affected, and all what we are saying is that government needs more funding, more funds to be able to iron out all the economic challenges that we are facing. So indeed, the private sector really needs the funds. Okay. Not only government needs the funds, so private sector needs enough funding to be able to shore up their productivity and increase growth.
Dr. Jabil Mohammed, appreciate your time with us, Banking and Finance Lecturer at the UPSA. Grateful you could join us. Well, also in the news this afternoon, the Institute of Economic Affairs is calling for the establishment of an independent parliamentary budget office to monitor Ghana's monetary and fiscal systems. This, the institute says, will ensure stricter monetary and fiscal management systems to transform the economy. According to a group of civil society organizations, Director of Research, Dr. John Kwawu, said a parliamentary budget office is necessary in assessing and estimating the cost of government projects and programs.
We are calling for the establishment of an independent parliamentary budget office. That's what is normally called a fiscal council. Okay? Now, in the US, they have a congressional budget office. In the UK, they have Office of Budget Responsibility, and others have fiscal councils. Now, the idea of a parliamentary budget office is that it is manned by independent professionals. They are not appointed by the president, and they work with Parliament. They assist Parliament in carrying out its oversight role over the budget. We want one, set up in Parliament in Ghana. They should be independent professionals appointed by the Public Services Commission, not the president. The president, we had established 2018 Fiscal Policy Advisory Council. It was appointed by him, and they work under him, and they are paid by him. We don't want that. Since they were formed, we haven't even heard about them. They are working in secrecy. We don't want, that's not the kind of fiscal council or parliamentary budget office that we are asking for. These are some of the functions that they will be undertaking, quite a government independent evaluation of government budgets, making forecasts, monitoring implementation of the budget, carrying out independent estimates of the cost of government projects, especially this. You see, we are in this country whereby, there's always the argument between the ruling party and the opposition that you constructed this interchange at an exorbitant price, or maybe an airport or something. And then you never get the truth. If we had the Parliamentary Budget Office, they will come out with their estimates of the cost of the government projects and give it to Parliament, make it available to Parliament.
Director of Research at the IE, addressing a group of civil society organizations. On Zoom with us with reaction is Dr. Daniela Martini, who is Executive Director of Think Tank Policy Initiative for Economic Development. Good afternoon to you. So, do we need an independent parliamentary budget office?
Yeah, thank you very much. The idea sounds quite great, but the reality on the ground is that I'm afraid it's not anything that will be feasible in terms of its implementation and then the expected impact envisaged by IE. Why am I saying so? By the very arrangement of our governance system. It is the executive that has the mandate by considering what should go into the budget and try to estimate same in terms of the cost and then present it on behalf of the president, present it before Parliament for approval. So what I will recommend is that how do we build the capacity of members of Parliament, especially members of the Finance Committee, to have that capacity to be able to analyze and be able to interrogate and ask the right questions in terms of the cost component or what goes into the budget. To me, that is what ought to be done, because I've observed that we have so many institutions and so many setups and laws in this country with over conflicting responsibilities and roles, and little is achieved. Instead of focusing on the existing structures, finding a way of strengthening such structures and building the capacity of the people within those sectors to be able to perform very well. So as much as I agree that it's a very sound kind of idea theoretically, in terms of implication, because these are the questions that ought to be asked. Whether such an independent body, are they going to have that legal right to be able to say, oh, finance minister, we are not supposed to put A, B, C, D into the budget, or it's just going to be an advisory role? If it is an advisory role, then it's just like any other body, any other functions that these advisory bodies are performing. Because the point is that if we want to give them that power to be able to interrogate it, then we need to deal with the legal framework as well. Because as it stands now, the responsibility to present a budget before the Parliament of Ghana, it is at the reserve of the executive, and that I'm referring to the President of the Republic. What ought to be done, in my respective view, is that we need to ask the right questions, to interrogate, and that oversight responsibility from Parliament is very key, because they have that legal mandate and that legal responsibility to be able to do that. That is one aspect of it, because if we establish this independent body, which I think theoretically is good, the question we should be asking is that how are they going to ensure that whatever recommendation that comes from them is implemented by the executive? That's a very big question mark, because at the end of the day, it is the executive, and here I'm referring to the Ministry of Finance, that determines what should go into the budget. And in terms of the cost and monitoring, I mean, that data is available. As for the politics of it, the most unfortunate thing in this country is that we focus on the politics without focusing on the issues. For example, it shouldn't be difficult to estimate the cost of an interchange because the data is there. It shouldn't be difficult for us to estimate a project executed by government, okay? But it is because of the politics that most often professionals and analysts like us don't focus on the cost, and we take up the political aspect of it. So, in short, what I'm saying is that theoretically it sounds great, but looking at our very governance structure and the legal setup that we have now, any such a body will just be an advisory body, and to me, it won't serve its purpose, and it will only just add cost to the budget in terms of the administrative mechanisms.
One of the arguments against it is that this could just be a duplication. And I guess here the emphasis is on an independent office, which seems to suggest that currently there's partisan influence. You talk about the politics in all of this. I want to also ask, what else can we do to hold governments more accountable. As we work towards an IMF deal, we are hoping that by middle of this month we may secure board approval so that we don't have to go back to the fund.
Yeah, sure. You see, then that is the reason which I indicated that the work of our honorable members in parliament is very key, and they ought to understand it. Once they get that understanding, then the way they approach government business will be different. They will not take it from the political dimension. So, for instance, if I am part of government,
that's really difficult to do, isn't it?
Difficult to hear me. Hello.
Now, I was just saying that for MPs to carry out their work without partisan influence could be very difficult.
Yes, not. Of course, there are certain issues that the politics, we cannot take it out of the equation. But let's take, we are going for a loan facility, a loan agreement with China. Every member of parliament should be able, it's not just a matter of taking the loan and celebrating that when we were in power, we were able to borrow 3 billion from China. No, the issue is it a good deal? That number one. Number two, the projects that this money will be expended on, whether indeed it will benefit the citizens. To me, these are issues that any MP should be able to peruse without any political colors. But I admit that there are certain issues that you cannot take politics off the line. I recall vividly, I stand to be corrected, the late Hawa Yakubu, may her soul rest in peace. When I was young and following parliament, there were so many issues by then that his government was in power. And you agree with the minority by then that, look, this particular issue is they should listen to the minority, and we need that caliber of people in parliament. And that's the only way for us to develop. If we follow the advanced economies, very well tell you we disagree with the position of the party. Okay, it's difficult though, but it is time for us to be able to toe that line if we want to develop this nation, if we want to see this nation at par with 8 PS on the globe. As much as it's difficult, I agree, but this is where professionalism ought should play the critical role. Okay. And to me, that's the way to go. I agree with you largely that the nature of our politics now, it will be kind of quite a difficult thing to do. But that's the solution, and that's the way to go. So that we shouldn't just be doing, no, yeah. But we must interrogate and peruse the issues critical to the benefit of the country.
Thank you so much. Dr. Daniela Martini, Executive Director of Policy Initiative for Economic Development. Now, the Social Security and National Insurance Trust (NET) has rolled out the self-employed enrollment drive to provide pensions and related benefits to self-employed workers in the informal sector. It is in line with the trust's mandate to extend pension coverage to all workers, especially the self-employed. Here's more in this report.
Only 1.9 million of the 10 million workers in the country are covered under the SNIT scheme. Only 32,000 persons, representing just 1.68% of active contributors, are self-employed, despite the fact that the majority of workers in the country are in the informal sector. Director General of SNIT, John Ofori-Tinkran, says there is a need for the trust to embark on aggressive marketing to attract the informal sector to sign up. He was speaking at the launch of the Self-Employment Enrollment Drive in Kumasi.
These self-employed persons, the law does not make it mandatory for them to join. So they have to, if they are going to come and join us, it will be because they've seen and heard what is in it for them, and that is why they will come to us. So the first thing we've done is to go out on an aggressive marketing campaign to explain exactly what it is that we do, which are the 4 things that I told you about, that we will replace your salary when you achieve the ripe old age of 60. Or if God were to call you early, or God to pension you early, we will pay you a survivor's benefit to the people who you leave behind. Or if God forbid, for some reason you become permanently invalid and unable to work, we will pay you until death. And then the last thing being that if you are a member in good standing and you go and enroll, you go for health insurance renewal, you don't have to pay anything.
That's a marketplace. Thanks for watching, everyone. There is more news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. Banking industry to face crisis if government fails to secure $1.5 billion stability fund by July. That's according to US-based economists. Also, you can read more about our top story, establish an independent parliamentary budget office to monitor monetary fiscal systems. The IEA saying that. myjoyonline.com/business. My name is Daryl Kwawu. Thanks for watching. We will be back same time tomorrow.